Hello and welcome to Salon Talks. I'm Andrew O'Hare, the executive editor of Salon, and I'm really delighted to have with me today the filmmaker Steve McQueen, perhaps best known to the world as the director of the Oscar-winning film 12 Years a Slave, but that's certainly not his only credit. And Steve is here as the director, co-writer, and producer of a very exciting new film called Widows, which is just about to open in the United States. Is that right?
That's correct, on the 16th, this Friday.
16th. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's very exciting. I've been following your work since Hunger. I was one of the people who sought that movie out and was really thrilled by it, and you've gone from strength to strength since then. This one, Widows, it's been described as a heist movie, and that's not completely wrong, right? It does fit into that sort of Hollywood tradition of the people who plan a robbery and carry it out. That's what happens, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it is, you know, again, I love the idea of when you go into a movie theater, once you sit down and the movie starts, the train takes off. And this is a roller coaster ride through the sort of, the current environment of Chicago.
That definitely happens in this movie without giving too much away. In the first 30 seconds, if they're not grabbed, right?
Well, I'm hoping that people's popcorn gets sort of jolted out of their hands and their soda gets thrown on their chest. Hopefully it's not too much. Because you're propelled into the movie from the get-go. That's what I wanted. I want to bring people immediately into the narrative. It's sort of a visceral experience.
And I kind of hate to label things this way, and I know that directors don't usually like this either, but there is a way in which this feels more like, a Hollywood film than some of your previous films are, in that sense that you're talking about, that it's meant as, I think there's lots of things going on under the surface, but it's meant to grab you from the first moment. It's meant to be an entertainment. People who want to see an action film will not necessarily be disappointed.
No, and I love that because I love pace. I mean, I saw something like It Hot the other day, and it's so fast, that picture. It's so fast. I mean, Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon, within, I don't know, I can't remember, was it 8, 9 minutes? I can't remember. They were on the train on their way to Florida. It's incredible. Yeah. So for me, the fact that from the get-go it's a heist picture, the train has left the station, as well as that there's another strand of narrative. That's the action as such, the heist. The other strand of narrative is the election. So
that's right.
Dealing with politics, I wanted to deal with it within the election because you knew there was a pace to it. People had to sort of, anyway, I'll let you sort of ask the questions, and I'm doing both, so I apologize.
No, that's great. I mean, I do think one of the things about this movie, it is in many ways a Hollywood heist film, but it also has all of these themes packed into it. It addresses politics. There's a political campaign that's a major part of the story. It addresses gender relations between men and women, which we can certainly talk about. And even though it's hardly ever specifically about race relations, that's also very sort of a prominent element.
I would say specific.
Well, in the political campaign, you're right, of course. In the political campaign, which is between a white candidate played by Colin Farrell.
No, but not just that. Not just that. We're talking about land. We're talking about sort of some sort of creeping in sort of sort of gerrymandering and land grabbing. Again, there's sort of similar thing which is going on, all over the world, not just here in New York or even in Chicago. There's sort of, gentrification which is happening.
And I assume that this film, as most major movies, was a couple of years in development at least, and you can't really have known that this movie was going to come out right at the time of an American political election that has mesmerized not just our country. I know people are following it all over the world because of the significance of this one. And also in sort of the immediate aftermath of the Me Too movement, which has focused attention on women's issues in a different way. You can't have known that, but at the same time, it's not entirely an accident, right?
Well, I think history has a way of repeating itself. So, it's, one doesn't have to sort of imagine too hard. It's one of those things where, things were maybe brewing, but no one. I saw Widows, the TV show, 35 years ago. The bittersweetness of that is nothing has changed since that time. So, as a 13-year-old black child looking at that TV show, identifying with these women, how they were being judged, visually, similar to how I was being judged by my parents and deemed as not being capable. And at the same time, you have a situation where these, the politics have suddenly kind of come about. I mean, we had Margaret Thatcher, don't forget, came into power in 1979, so that changed the landscape. These things, the history repeats itself.
I think probably most American viewers won't know that this movie is based on, basically it was a TV miniseries in Britain, is that right?
Yes, it was written by a woman called Linda LaPlante, who you might know because she wrote Prime Suspect.
Yes, indeed.
Which had a Mirren sort of amazing sort of starring role. She wrote that, but her first TV show was Widows. And I remember seeing that as a 13-year-old child, and my relationship with that in some ways is seeing myself on screen. Before, as a young child, you project yourself onto sort of Sean Connery playing James Bond, or even Johnny Weissmuller playing Tarzan. But for the first time, I saw these women who I could identify with because of the disadvantages they had within the broader, wider world, and having to surf and navigate that in order to sort of survive and to achieve in this drama.
And what you managed to build here is an amazing cast, and we can talk about that in a minute. And then your co-writer for this project is Gillian Flynn, the novelist, best known for Gone Girl, both the novel and the screenplay for David Fincher's film. Oh. Did she find it's a natural fit, this material, you and her? But did she find you? Did you find her? How did that happen?
Well, it was again. I found the material 35 years ago.
Yes.
So it was something that was just close to my heart, and I wanted to base the narrative in Chicago because I had been here. I first got to Chicago 22 years ago when I did my first museum show. I'm an artist. My first solo show was in Chicago. My partner at the time, who's now my wife, was going to the Democratic Convention, which was...
No kidding.
Yes, and Bill Clinton was the president then, of course.
Yeah.
So I always say my first footprint in Chicago was art and politics. So Gillian, I didn't know actually was from Chicago at the first, and I was just, Gone Girl, saw Gone Girl, and I loved a bit with Carrie Coon, and I thought maybe she'd be a wonderful person to work with, and of course she's a great writer. So we got in contact, and it was a house on fire, basically. We got on like a house on fire. We're very different, but it's one of those things where, differences, that's the gel, that's the thing, it bonds, there's the thing to grab onto. And I think, we were sort of we saw each other, we did a lot of sort of investigating, went to the FBI headquarters in Chicago. We went to see, certain people in the underworld as such, private investigators, politicians off record, aldermen, politicians, off record, police, whatnot. And I remember us actually, myself and Gillian, coming out of the FBI offices after we spent there. We spent 3 hours there. I don't think they wanted us to go. I think we were like a surrogate psychiatrist for them. And no, seriously.
I believe it.
Because I think we were asking questions because those guys don't go to see shrinks. So therefore,
they probably should.
Well, they're tough guys. They're guys. And I think when we're asking these questions, we're going deeper and deeper and deeper. By the time myself and Gillian left that building, it was like it was like the numbers in the Matrix. We saw how the actual city actually worked. So it was just a great collaboration, and again, it got to a situation where it was like two, guitarists, and you couldn't tell who was playing each other's note.
Were you thinking at all about, because I can't help, despite the ways which is a very contemporary story and draws on the British miniseries, I can't help though thinking of certain classic American urban crime films. The French Connection or Sidney Lumet's movies, that Prince of the City movies like that, where you have these different strands of crime and politics and everything. Were you thinking of that kind of tradition at all? Did you see those movies?
I know I saw this movie, but no, I think our movie is not like that at all. I would say it's much more. I mean, you can equate it to that because of the politics, to some extent. But the politics is kind of fleeting because we're mostly based on the emotional growth of the characters. The politics is not the heart and center of the picture. Like I said, there are three strands. I spoke about the sort of thriller action strand. But the other strand, of course, the second one is the politics. So therefore, how I dealt with the politics was actually by making an election, so that we knew there was a race already. That causes the speed as well. And then the third sort of trajectory is that these women are forced, after their husbands die, to sort of, basically, become criminals, basically do their husband's last heist. Because Veronica, the main character played by Viola Davis.
Viola Davis, yes, wonderful.
Finds her husband's notebook with all these plans for his last heist. So therefore there's this emotional journey which they are forced to sort of go on, and of course they think they have to learn fast. So you have these three strands. In fact, there's a fourth one, but I won't go into. There's for now. Otherwise we get into. That's what there's three strands which crisscross. Which there are chicanes, there are rapids, and of course there are waterfalls. So when all these three strands or four are crisscrossing, it's very stimulating cinema, because you are asking for the audience's attention and rewarding them for it. But it's the rush, it's the excitement. It's like being on a roller coaster ride, because it's one of those things which the thing I'm very pleased about this picture is that, of course, when you make a film, when you finish it, the missing ingredient of that film, you've done the mixing and the color grading, whatever, is the audience.
Yeah.
And the response from the audience that we've had is so many people say, I've got to see it again. And of course, that's heartwarming, but at the same time, I want to see it again. I get it, because it's like a roller coaster ride. You want to see it with the audience. Two, the whole idea of anticipating the twists and turns is half of the thrill the second time.
Yes. I think I was thinking about that actually. I was thinking what I would understand differently watching it a second time, having seen it just once. And so I think what we can say, since you just said this about the plot, is yes, this group of 4 women must decide to pull a heist because their husbands have been. What do you want to say?
Well,
about
because
it?
their lives have been threatened, because they owe this rival gang money.
Right. And their husbands are dead as a result of a heist gone wrong. You
Absolutely.
can see that,
yes.
right? And I will say, without giving anything away, that those who know Gillian Flynn's work and wonder, is there some kind of an aha moment? Are there moments where the audience is going to go, what? That might occur.
Well, it's not. It's one of those things where it's not cheap. Well, again, forgive me for being bold. It's not cheap in that sense of there's a reason, cause, and effect for these things to happen, and within the narrative trajectory and how you sort of reveal and how you sort of hold back and how you sort of tell the story is very, very important, as you know. I mean, 2 people tell your story in a pub. The other one, you fall asleep. The other one is like, my God, tell what, and then what, and then what. So that's what I wanted in some ways. I think Gillian has that sort of has that skill. At the same time, it's one of those things where it is an emotional awakening for these women. So the actual. What can I say? Things which will sort of appear on screen, which will maybe arise. It's organic. It's nothing to do with some cheap thrills as such.
No, I agree with that. I think it's organic, and again, without giving anything away, I will say that one of the plot twists in this movie I sort of halfway suspected, and then the other one one of the others I didn't see coming at all. And we won't give anything away beyond that. But that feels like a pretty healthy balance to me.
Well, I think a halfway expecting is good, because you don't actually know. I mean, and you'll see when the character's halfway expect but doesn't really know. Right. But also when you find out, you do, well, how, who, why, and what, and then you find out the whole thing. So it's one of those things where it's like life in a way. Your secrets can be kept from you for a long time, and then you find out a little detail, and you unravel it, and think, oh my goodness, for this amount of time I didn't know. So it's like Hitchcock in a way. In some ways, there's a situation where I love the fact that it's exciting, and audiences are rewarded for their patience.
And this feels probably, you may disagree with this. This feels like you're using plot more prominently than in your previous films. I think because you came out of the visual art world, and because Hunger was a film with very little talking in it, that people saw that perhaps as a film made by an artist, made by a visual artist, and thought that maybe you weren't interested in the linguistic elements, the plot elements.
No, I disagree completely, because if people didn't know I was a visual artist, they wouldn't be saying that. I mean, that's unfortunate. That's not true. I mean, it's just not true. I mean, if people know I was a visual artist, they wouldn't say that. And as far as plot is concerned, it's how you use plot. I mean, plot isn't always a sort of intrigal sort of cat and mouse game. It could be. Plot is how you want to tell the story. How you, as an individual, want to tell a story. Sometimes you want to tell it fast, sometimes you want to tell it slow, sometimes you want to tell only one strand, sometimes you want to show things in one straight line. There's variations of yarns and how you tell them.
The cast is so amazing in this movie. There's all kinds of, including relatively small performances from fairly big. You have Liam Neeson in the movie for just a few minutes and makes a terrific impact. I thought, as a one example. But talk about the four women in the center of the film. We talked about Viola Davis, an amazing talent who really is. The star, the magnetic center of the story here. But talk about the women that you surrounded her with.
Well, I can't talk about them without talking about Viola Davis and Veronica and her part. But I'll start with Belle. Belle is a woman who is she's a can-do woman. She has a daughter. She is a single parent. She is a babysitter. And her mother looks after her daughter while she looks after other people's kids. And as well, she works in a salon. And as a character, she is, she has no time for fear. Fear doesn't help her. She is a person who basically is a can-do person. And, within the environment, she lives in the projects in the south side of Chicago. Yeah. And, she has to have her wits about her.
And that actress who I
Cynthia Erivo.
Yes, yeah, I've seen her before, but this is one of her bigger.
She never. That's her first film. I think she was in El Royale. I think it's El Royale movie. But this was her first film, and before that, she has a Tony. She has a Grammy and an Emmy already because she was a star of A Color Purple on Broadway.
Right.
Then there's Michelle Rodriguez, who of course Fast and the Furious, who plays Linda. She owns a shop in the Latino part of the area. I think it's a more Puerto Rican, Dominican part of the area.
Yeah.
And she basically she has her own business, or at least she thinks she does, until her husband dies. And she has two children too, so she has to make ends meet when her husband sort of dies. And then of course there's Alice. Alice is a Polish woman in the film who's she's dealing with domestic abuse. Her husband used to knock her about, and not only her husband, but she's been used as a bit of a punch bag for a while in her life, and she has a sort of a longer sort of route to travel in this picture, and she's a bit like a phoenix.
And this is the actress who I saw you describe the other night as the next Meryl Streep. That's
absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Why do you think that about her?
She's that good.
And these, of course, these are people who have done other roles, but this was a process of discovery for you with these actresses, right? Viola Davis, obviously not so much. And how did
no, I felt it was a bit of a discovery. I mean, of course, she's a Viola bloody Davis. But what I mean by that is the discovery, because unfortunately, she's never had a role like this before. And I think that the fact that you could give her something to grapple with, I think, it was like throwing sort of meat at a lion. She devoured it, and she gorged it, and she sort of, she's so strong, but at the same time, there's depth, there's weakness, there's vulnerability, there's humanity, and again, that's why she's one of the greatest actresses of her generation, because she reflects who we are, male, female, whatever race you are. You look at her and you see yourself, and that's the genius of her being a great actor, that you can see yourself through the person on screen.
That's a wonderful way to put it, and it seemed appropriate in a movie that is this much about kind of women's struggle. Because that kind of flexibility, a lot of male stars get to do different kinds of roles. You play in something more serious in a darker film, and then you get to be the action star in a different kind of film. It's harder, generally speaking, for women to get to do that. I think.
Yeah,
still.
I think there's not a lot of imagination, unfortunately. And that's it, because again, this is the picture with a lot of amazing male actors. I mean, you've got Liam Neeson, the biggest action movie star in the world. You've got Colin Farrell, a great actor. Daniel Kaluuya, I mean,
yes,
the depth. Brian Tyrese Henry, Robert Duvall. I mean, if you listen, I think what's interesting about this picture, people saying yes, there's women in this picture, but the men are so strong. And it's a great balance, it's a great balance of masculinity and femininity and adventure and action and a thriller, and very timely for some. I don't know. I didn't. That wasn't the intention, but I'm very grateful that it happened.
The male actors, it really is an amazing ensemble. I wasn't.
Sure.
I had almost forgotten about Robert Duvall, who's only in the movie for a few minutes, but is amazing. And
well, don't tell the pop up with that because that's not true. But it's not about. As we all know, it's not about sort of the time. It's
yes.
about what you do with the time.
Yes.
And Robert smashes it.
Yes. And you have the Australian actress Jackie Weaver in a tiny
Yes.
little role, who's incredible in a very small part in this movie, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, again, it's not about time, it's about what you do with the time. And I think, again, that's why, for me, what was very important is the so-called small roles or the big roles were, occupied by people who had ability. And I was very fortunate that people wanted to work on this project, regardless of the size, because without their impact, it doesn't work. I mean, without Jackie Weaver, there's none of that. What we just talked about with what Alice is going through as a character, her unfortunate sort of being used as a punchbag, and who can do that? So it's very important in some ways for me for this film that the ensemble is so strong, and I was very grateful for the actors who want to participate in this film.
Well, I think it's a real treat for people to get to see all of these great actors in something that is so densely crafted. Widows is in theaters November 16th. That is this week as we speak. Steve McQueen, the Oscar-winning director, co-writer, and producer of this film. Thank you so much for stopping by.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.